The text from my daughter, Chloe, hit me like a puck to the gut. Dad, we're planning a quiet Christmas with Liam's folks this year. Quiet, she said. After 3 decades of me being their personal ATM, their Santa Claus, their fixer, I just typed back, "No worries, eh? Enjoy your peace." They had no idea that my brand new place, the one I'd poured my heart and soul into, was about to be the epicenter of a Christmas party they wouldn't soon forget, a party they weren't invited to. When the pictures inevitably popped up online, I knew they'd come barreling in furious, and what they did when they arrived, well, that's another story. But let me tell you, I knew right then they'd be kicking themselves later. My phone, a little buzz against the smooth quartz of the kitchen island, pulled me back. I set down my Tim Hortons mug and peered at the screen. Chloe. My smile faded fast. Finally, a response about Christmas dinner. The words, when they registered, landed like a body blow. We want to sit quietly for Christmas with the in-laws. I read it once, then again. The morning sun streaming through the west-facing windows of my custom-built home seemed to mock the sudden chill that had just invaded my perfectly planned retirement. My grip tightened on the phone knuckles white. 30 years. 30 goddamn years of bailing them out, being there for every little kerfuffle, every whim, every want. The memories flooded back with a clarity that stung. Her university tuition at Western, 60 grand a year when she bounced from psychology to communications, then finally settled on business. Dad, I really think graphic design is my calling now, she'd said once. I paid every bill, never a peep of complaint. The wedding to Liam, my contribution alone was $45,000. We want it to be perfect, Dad, she'd insisted. It's a once-in-a-lifetime day. I watched her twirl in a dress that cost more than most people's cars, while Liam's family simply offered their blessing and a store-bought fruit platter. The down payment on their house last year, another $80,000. We found the perfect place, Daddy, she'd chirped. The neighborhood is amazing for when we have kids. Kids that never materialized, but the requests for cash from me never ceased. Every phone call began the same way, Dad. I hate to ask, but... And yet she never hated it enough to stop asking. Car repairs, credit card debt, their Whistler vacation funds, kitchen renos. The list stretched back decades. And I gave. Always gave. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking my impeccably landscaped backyard. This custom-built place, purchased just last month for $2.8 million, was supposed to be my reward, my sanctuary, the place where I'd finally host a proper Canadian Christmas dinner in style, where my family would finally see what their old man had built through decades of smart investments and careful planning. The crypto portfolio that made me a fortune, while others called it gambling. The tech startup investments that paid off when folks said I was too old to grasp the market. The consulting business that thrived because I never lost my edge. But none of that mattered to Chloe. To her, I was just a walking, talking bank account. Sit quietly with the in-laws. Translation: my money is welcome, but I'm not. The hurt twisted into something colder, sharper. I'd spent enough years being taken for granted. Time to show them what Christmas looked like when people actually wanted to be there. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to Paul's number. My brother had always seen through Chloe's manipulations, though. He'd held his tongue for my sake. Not anymore. The phone rang twice before his familiar gravelly voice answered. Arthur, perfect timing. I was just thinking about Christmas plans. Paul, I said, keeping my voice steady, controlled. Are you and Sarah free for Christmas dinner? I'm hosting at the new place. Hell yes, Sarah's been dying to see your custom-built home. What brought this on, I thought you were going to Chloe's. I glanced at the text still glowing on my screen. Change of plans, I said, a dry chuckle escaping me. She's sitting quietly with the in-laws. The silence stretched for a few heartbeats. Then Paul's voice came back sharp with anger. That ungrateful little... Paul, you're right. But damn it, Arthur, how long are you going to let her treat you like an ATM? Paul's voice was still thick with indignation. Not anymore, I said, and the words once foreign on my tongue felt absolutely right, like a fresh coat of snow on a clear December morning. Will you call Mark and Janet? Tell them they're invited too. And the Hendersons, if they're back from their ski trip. Consider it done, Art. Paul boomed. You know what? This is going to be the best Christmas dinner you've ever hosted. People who actually appreciate what you've done for them. After I hung up, I walked through my empty home with a fresh set of eyes. This wasn't just a place. It was a statement. The formal dining room set to comfortably seat a dozen, the chef's kitchen with its dual ovens and warming drawers, the entertainment lounge with its massive stone fireplace and panoramic windows overlooking the ravine. Every nook and cranny screamed potential. It was time to make it roar. The next call was to Tom Richardson, my old business partner, the one who'd helped me broker that game-changing tech deal that netted me a cool 7 figures. Then Patricia Webb, who'd been right there cheering me on when my startup went public. These were the folks who'd seen my hustle, my grit, not just the contents of my bank account. Tom Richardson speaking. Tom, it's Arthur, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. Arthur, never a bad time for you, buddy. What's up? I gave him the quick rundown. Christmas dinner at my place. Close friends only. December 23rd, 6 o'clock sharp. Tom's enthusiasm was immediate and genuinely heartwarming. Are you kidding? Linda and I have been practically begging for an invitation to see the famous estate. She's still talking about those housewarming photos you sent. Count us in absolutely. Each conversation, each warm response chipped away at the old bitterness, revealing something I'd almost forgotten. I had friends, real ones, people who valued my company, not just my contributions to their bank accounts. I moved from the kitchen to my home office, pulling out a yellow legal pad, feeling a spark of joy as I started to plan the menu. Prime rib for sure. I'd get that from the best butcher in town. Roasted root vegetables, some creamy twice-baked potatoes, a crisp Caesar salad, and if I could twist her arm, Patricia's legendary tiramisu. And for wine, that 2018 Cassis Cabernet I'd been saving for a truly special occasion. This was it. In the living room, I started rearranging the furniture, creating cozy conversation nooks. The oversized leather sectional angled perfectly toward the fireplace, and I pulled in additional seating from the formal sitting area. The home's open concept was made for entertaining something I'd had in mind when I bought it, though if I'm honest, I'd pictured different guests at the time. By 4 o'clock, the catering order was placed, the house was prepped, and my guest list was solid. 10 people who would appreciate both the good food and the good company. 10 people who saw me as more than just a walking, talking funding source. The afternoon had utterly transformed my formerly empty mansion into a place alive with possibility. Tomorrow night, this house would be everything I'd envisioned when I bought it. The doorbell chimed at exactly 6 o'clock. Through the etched glass of the foyer doors, I could make out Paul's familiar silhouette, a bottle of something nice tucked under his arm, and Sarah beside him carrying what looked like a covered casserole dish. I opened the door to my brother's wide grin and Sarah's immediate gasp of appreciation. Holy moly, Art Paul stepped inside, his eyes sweeping over the two-story entryway with its grand curved staircase and sparkling crystal chandelier. Photos truly don't do this place justice. Sarah was already moving through the space, her eyes taking in every meticulous detail. The millwork alone must have cost a fortune. And these windows, she gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the landscaped gardens. It's like something straight out of Architectural Digest. Before I could respond, car doors slammed in the driveway. Tom and Linda Richardson emerged from their BMW, followed immediately by the Hendersons' Mercedes. Within minutes, my foyer was buzzing with warm greetings, inside jokes, and genuine excitement. Arthur, this is incredible. Linda Richardson turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. When you said you'd bought a place, I pictured something nice. This is magnificent. The words hit differently than they would have coming from Chloe. These people weren't calculating what it cost, or wondering what else they could get from me. It wasn't about what they could get from me, eh? It was pure, unadulterated joy for my good fortune. I beamed, guiding them through the great room, my heart swelling as I showcased the thoughtful touches, the locally sourced timber accents, the imposing fieldstone fireplace, the state-of-the-art entertainment system, perfect for a Raptors game or a classic, tragically hip concert. Every single detail sparked genuine admiration. Art, you've truly hit the jackpot, haven't you? Mark Henderson clapped me on the back, a wide, honest grin on his face. All those years of taking calculated risks, of burning the midnight oil, it was all worth it. Just then, Patricia Webb breezed in perfectly fashionably, later famous tiramisu held aloft like a trophy. Her phone was out before her coat was off. Arthur, you have to let me put these on the feed. This place is absolutely breathtaking, and honestly, you look like $1 million right now. I just nodded, a genuine smile plastered across my face. Why the heck not? I'd busted my hump for this success, this magnificent place. It deserved to be shared with folks who actually cheered for me, not those who just saw dollar signs and felt entitled. The night just flowed. Cocktails by the roaring fireplace, then a seamless transition to the formal dining room. The prime rib, courtesy of the finest butcher in town, was grilled to perfection. The wine from my special cellar was outstanding, and the chatter was easy weaving between old hockey stories, new business ventures, and future plans. Remember when you first mentioned diving into that crypto thing, Art? Tom raised his glass, a twinkle in his eye. We all thought you were off your rocker. Some of us. Linda chimed in, a good-natured laugh bubbling up. I told Tom to trust your gut, Arthur, but he was too chicken. Best advice I ever ignored, Tom conceded, shaking his head with a grin. Look where it got him. A wave of something profound washed over me. Genuine respect. It felt like finding a loonie in an old coat pocket, a forgotten treasure. These weren't people looking to tap into my resources. They were true blue friends celebrating a pal's win. Then Paul stood up, tapping his spoon against his glass for an impromptu toast. To my brother Arthur. Paul's voice resonated warm and steady, who always trusted his instincts, even when the rest of us were scratching our heads. And to this incredible home, where we're finally having the Christmas bash, he truly deserves. Glasses clinked together, a chorus of "Hear, hear," erupted, and the laughter picked right back up. In that moment, Surrounded by these good people, I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had been absent for years. I felt valued. Patricia, bless her heart, had been snapping away all night. Candid moments of lively chatter, group shots by the impressive stone fireplace, even artsy close-ups of the festive table spread. "These are going straight to the social feed," she declared, beaming. "Everyone needs to see what a stunning evening this is." I didn't even think to object. Let the whole darn world see what true success looked like, especially when it was shared with the people who truly mattered. The party was humming along beautifully, the atmosphere thick with joy, when my phone started vibrating like crazy against my thigh. I snuck a peek through my pant pocket, a familiar knot of dread tightening in my stomach. Chloe. I mumbled an excuse, something about checking an email, and retreated towards my home office, the happy din of the party slowly fading behind me. I stepped inside, closing the heavy oak door, and took a deep breath before answering. "Hello, Chloe." "What the hell is this, Dad?" Her voice was like a shard of ice, cutting right through any semblance of politeness. "No hi, no how are you. Patricia Webb just plastered photos of some party at your place with Uncle Paul and everyone." I leaned back against my desk, letting her words sink in. So she'd seen them. Good. "It's Christmas dinner," I stated calmly. "You said you wanted a quiet Christmas with the in-laws." "I never said that." Her denial was so quick, so defensive, I almost let out a snort of disbelief. "Would you like me to read your exact text message back to you, Chloe?" A beat of silence. Then a sputtering, "That's not what I meant." "Oh, because your words were, and I quote, 'We want to sit quietly for Christmas with the in-laws.' So what part of that was ambiguous exactly?" I pressed my voice, steady. "You're being deliberately difficult, Dad. You knew what I meant." "Actually, no, I didn't." I countered, a wry smile playing on my lips. "I genuinely thought you preferred a low-key Christmas with Liam's family over spending it with your old man. So I simply made alternate arrangements." Her breathing hitched audible and ragged through the line. "You went behind my back. You invited everyone but us. I invited the people who wanted to spend Christmas with me, Chloe. You made it pretty clear you didn't." Her next words tumbled out in a frustrated torrent, finally hitting the real nerve. "And where did this house even come from? How can you afford a place like this? Dad, where did all that money suddenly appear?" There it was, the true concern, not about missing me, not about family togetherness, but about the inheritance she hadn't anticipated, being excluded from Christmas dinner. Chloe's stunned silence spoke volumes, a perfect echo of the shock that ripped through her when she finally twigged onto something she couldn't control: my money. Money she never knew existed, money she couldn't get her mitts on. "I've been successful, Chloe." I stated the words steady, more successful than you realized, apparently. "Successful how?" She shot back, her voice laced with disbelief. "You never told me about any house purchase, about having this kind of money." A cold clarity, sharper than a January breeze off Lake Ontario, settled over me. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, a hard resolve. "I don't owe you a financial report, kiddo." I replied, the words coming out firmer than I'd intended. "I'm a grown man who made smart investments and built a thriving consulting business. This house, this life, it's the result of 30 years of grinding it out of hard work, plain and simple." "But, Dad, no." She protested, a whine creeping into her tone. "No," I countered, cutting her off. "I won't be guilt-tripped for celebrating with people who actually appreciate me. And I certainly won't apologize for having success you didn't know about. I won't pretend your text message meant anything other than what it clearly stated, either." The silence stretched between us, thick with years of unspoken resentment, finally bubbling to the surface. "You're being spiteful." She accused, the words dripping with accusation. "This is just because I can't make it to dinner one time." "No, Chloe," I said, a deep breath settling my voice. "This is because for 30 years I've been nothing more than a walking ATM to you. Because every single conversation starts with what you need from me, never with what you can give back. Because you've taken my support for granted while showing me absolutely zero respect." "That's not true." Her voice rose, a desperate denial. "Oh, really? When was the last time you called just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you showed genuine interest in my life that didn't involve what I could provide for yours?" Another silence, longer this time, filled the line. I pressed on. "I have friends here tonight, Chloe, right outside this door. They are genuinely happy for my success. They celebrate my achievements instead of calculating what they can get from them. This is what Christmas looks like when people actually want to be here. You can't just exclude family because you excluded yourself." The accusation in her voice was like a chip of ice. My voice was calm now, steady as a rock. "You made your choice, Chloe. I made mine. This isn't over, Dad." The threat in her voice was unmistakable, sharp as a fresh blade. "You can't just cut us out because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." And with that, the line went dead. I stood in the quiet of my office phone, still in my hand, processing what had just happened. Through the heavy oak door, I could hear the continued sound of celebration. Genuine laughter, animated conversation, the happy clink of glasses raised in authentic joy. For the first time in 30 years, I'd drawn a line in the snow, and it felt exactly right. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and reached for the door handle, ready to rejoin people who valued me for who I was not, what I could provide. But as my fingers touched the cool brass, her words echoed in the silent room. "This isn't over, Dad." The threat carried a weight I couldn't ignore. Was I being too harsh? Too final? I stood frozen for a moment, the phone heavy in my pocket, a stone of lingering guilt. 30 years of fatherhood didn't just evaporate with one confrontation. I remembered teaching her to skate on the pond, helping her with homework after school, walking her down the aisle on her wedding day. That little girl had grown into someone I barely recognized. The sound of laughter filtered through the door, genuine, warm, uncomplicated. I straightened my shirt, checked my reflection in the window, and took a deep breath. Whatever came next, I wouldn't let Chloe's drama destroy what I'd built tonight. I opened the door and stepped back into the warmth of celebration. The contrast hit me immediately. The cold isolation of conflict versus this atmosphere of authentic connection, of shared happiness. Paul noticed me first. His expression shifted from jovial host to concerned brother in seconds. "Art everything okay?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I nodded towards the kitchen, and he followed me away from the other guests. The hum of conversation provided enough cover for privacy. "She called," I said simply. Paul's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" "She saw Patricia's photos on the social feed," I explained, leaning against the cool granite counter where this morning had started. "Accused me of going behind her back, wanted to know where the money for this place came from. Wanted a quiet Christmas." "Right." Paul's voice, a familiar rumble of decades-long frustration, cut through my self-doubt. "Arthur, you've basically handed her the remote control for 30 years. She's not fuming about missing out on roast beef, pal. She's livid because she lost her grip on you." I swallowed hard. But what if I'm way off base? What if this is actually... Paul's hand, heavy and reassuring, landed on my shoulder, cutting me off. Stop, eh? She hung up, didn't she? Paul stated more than asked, his eyes sharp. I gave a small nod, my jaw tight, recalling Chloe's parting shot. After laying down the law, yes. Paul scoffed, softly. That, my friend, is not how a person acts when they're trying to clear the air. That's how someone acts when their usual game plan blows up in their face. Just then, Tom Richardson, bless his observant soul, appeared in the kitchen doorway, a look of mild concern on his face. "Pardon the intrusion, Art Paul," he began, "but we couldn't help but notice you looked a bit, well, let's just say you weren't blending in with the festive decor. Everything all right, eh?" Tom asked, genuinely. Before I could even formulate a polite deflection, Paul stepped in. "Just a bit of family theater, Tom. Arthur's daughter, Chloe, is apparently quite put out that he's actually hosting Christmas dinner here, instead of kowtowing to her usual demands." Tom's expression, previously solicitous, hardened with instant recognition. "Ah," he drawled the single syllable, thick with understanding. "The old entitled offspring syndrome. Linda and I had a similar situation with her brother. 45 years old and still expected us to fund his entire existence." My ears pricked up. "What did you do?" I found myself asking, cutting him off, eager for some wisdom. "Cut him off completely," Tom stated, his voice as flat and unyielding as a prairie horizon. "Best decision we ever made." He watched my face for a reaction. Oh, he threw a fit, mind you. Threatened to never darken our doorstep again, the whole shebang. 6 months later, though, he was back with a job and a surprisingly sincere apology. Linda, drawn by the suddenly serious undertone in the kitchen, glided over. "Are we delving into the thorny topic of family boundaries?" She chimed in, a knowing glint in her eye. "Because, oh boy, do I have a few thoughts on that subject." The conversation, once a quiet murmur, swelled into a chorus as other guests, sensing the shift in mood, drifted from the living room towards the kitchen. It became a spontaneous support group, everyone sharing their own battle scars. Stories of adult children who treated them like a personal ATM, itlings who saw their success as an open invitation to demand parents who wielded guilt like a credit card. "The toughest pill to swallow," Patricia admitted, leaning against the island, "is realizing that true love isn't about enabling. It's about letting them stand on their own 2 feet, even if they stumble. Sometimes," she concluded, her voice soft but firm, "the kindest thing you can do is say a resounding no." Mark Henderson nodded gravely. "My old man always used to say respect isn't handed down like a family heirloom. You earn it. Applies to kin just as much as strangers." A strange lightness began to unfurl in my chest, easing the knot I hadn't realized was there. This wasn't some self-help guru spouting empty cliches. These were my people, my true blue Canadian pals. They were the friends who'd quietly watched me be bled dry for years, who'd seen the toxic pattern I'd been too entangled to recognize. "You don't owe anyone your dignity, Arthur," Paul murmured, his voice a low, steady anchor. "Not even your own kid." As the evening flowed on, the earlier tension evaporated, replaced by the renewed warmth of genuine celebration. The conversation shifted back to lighter, more jovial topics. Hockey Cottage Country, the best spot for poutine. But the quiet, unwavering support remained wrapping around me like a thick, comforting Hudson's Bay blanket. A safety net I hadn't even realized I desperately needed. Around 10 o'clock, I was busy topping up wine glasses, lost in the easy camaraderie, when an unfamiliar sound caught my ear from outside. Car doors slamming shut, then heavy, deliberate footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. I instinctively glanced towards the tall front windows, but all I could see was the inky darkness beyond the carefully placed landscape lights. Probably the Johnsons, finally getting home from that long weekend up north. Sarah offered, casually noticing my momentary distraction. I nodded, feigning agreement, and went back to my hosting duties. But the sounds, sharp and out of place, kept nagging at me. Those footsteps, though. They'd been too purposeful, too agitated, for a couple of neighbors just getting back from their cottage. And then about 20 minutes later, it started. Not a polite knock, not a friendly chime of the doorbell. This was a sustained, violent hammering blows, so aggressive they made the solid oak front door shudder in its frame. The easy conversation died instantly, words catching mid-sentence. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. Every single face in the great room snapped towards the front entrance, mirroring my own wide-eyed shock. A voice raw with fury ripped through the momentary silence. "Open this door right now, Chloe." Her voice, shrill and accusing, sliced through the night air like a cold front, sweeping off Lake Huron. "I know you're in there, Dad." My stomach plummeted, a heavy stone, dropping straight to my gut. She'd actually done it. Driven all the way across town, presumably abandoning Liam's quiet Christmas, to stomp all over mine and create a scene right here in front of everyone. The pounding resumed harder, now shaking the very foundation of the house. Bang, bang, bang. "Chloe, for heaven's sake, lower your voice." I called through the thick wood, moving towards the door with slow, deliberate steps. "We can discuss this like grown-ups, civilly." Her response was an immediate guttural shriek. "Don't you dare tell me what to do, old man." Her shriek was so piercing, it made several guests visibly wince, some even taking a step back. "This is utterly ridiculous. You can't just cut off your own flesh and blood because you're having some kind of midlife crisis, Dad." Then Liam's voice, a weaker, more placating echo of Chloe's fury, joined the assault. "Come on, Arthur. Just open up. We can talk about this, work it out, eh?" I glanced back at my friends, the genuine, kind-hearted people who had come to my custom-built home for a peaceful, joyful Christmas dinner, only to find themselves unwitting spectators to a full-blown family meltdown. The collective shock registered on every face in the room, a mix of embarrassment for me, anger on my behalf, and outright disbelief. I'm really sorry about this, folks," I stammered, addressing the stunned silence. Paul, ever my rock, stepped forward. His voice was low but carried a steel edge. "Don't apologize, Arthur. You're not responsible for her behavior." The frantic hammering intensified, threatening to rattle the very windows. My neighbors, the Johnsons, the McDonalds, the Millers down the street, they'd hear this. Soon enough, the whole cul-de-sac would be buzzing with the Collins family drama. I reached for the deadbolt, a grim certainty settling in. This had to end, and fast, before Chloe fully unhinged. The moment the lock clicked, the solid oak door flew inward with a violent crash, slamming against the wall. Chloe stormed in like a blizzard blowing straight off the prairies, her face contorted with a fury that felt primal. Liam trailed behind her, looking utterly shell-shocked, like a deer caught in headlights. He looked like a man who'd lost all control of his own life, let alone his wife's. "How dare you?" She practically shrieked, her finger trembling with rage, jabbing towards me. Her eyes, however, weren't fixed on me, but swept around the great room, taking in my assembled guests. "How dare you throw some fancy party and exclude your own daughter?" The living room moments ago, a symphony of laughter and conversation, fell into an unnerving silence, broken only by the steady tick-tock of the mantel clock. 10 pairs of eyes, belonging to some of the most successful and respectable people I knew, Watched my 32-year-old daughter throw a tantrum that would make a toddler blush. "Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "you're making a scene." "I don't care." She whirled around, her gaze raking over the elegant furnishings, the sparkling crystal stemware, the obvious undeniable expense of everything in my custom-built home. "Where did all this come from? How long have you been hiding money from me?" Patricia Webb, ever graceful but firm, took a small step forward, her phone still in her hand. "Excuse me, Chloe, but this is a private dinner party. You're being incredibly rude." Chloe's furious gaze snapped to her. You're the one posting pictures on social media. This is all your fault." Patricia remained unruffled. "I posted pictures of a beautiful home and a lovely evening with friends," she replied calmly. "Nothing inappropriate about that. It was inappropriate because I wasn't invited." Chloe spat, her voice rising. "You declined," I said quietly, reminding her of her exact words. "In writing, actually. That's not what I meant, and you know it." The sheer absurdity of the situation hung heavy in the air, clear to everyone present. Here was a grown woman, a married woman, furious that her father had chosen to celebrate Christmas with people who actually wanted to be there, instead of waiting around for her to bless him with her presence. Tom Richardson's voice, a calm but firm rumble, cut through the tension. "Ma'am, you need to calm down. This is completely unacceptable behavior." "Don't tell me what's acceptable." Chloe spun towards him, eyes blazing. "This is between me and my father. Not anymore. It isn't." Paul interjected, his voice carrying a quiet warning. "You've made it everyone's business by barging in here and screaming like a banshee." Liam, finally finding a shred of courage, spoke up weakly. "Maybe we should just go home, Chloe." "No." She silenced him with a look that could curdle milk. "I'm not leaving until this gets resolved." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with frightening speed. "What are you doing?" I asked, a fresh wave of dread washing over me. She looked up, a smile that sent shivers down my spine, plastered on her face. "Calling the police. If you won't listen to reason, maybe they'll make you understand." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. My guests, successful, respectable people who'd done nothing but accept a dinner invitation, stared in disbelief. "The police." Linda Richardson's voice was incredulous. "For what? For this?" Chloe gestured wildly around the room, her voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "For stealing family Christmas, for hiding assets, for elder abuse." The last accusation hung in the air like a cloud of toxic fumes, poisoning the very atmosphere. I watched my daughter, phone pressed to her ear, prepared to weaponize law enforcement because her father had dared to celebrate Christmas without her permission. Then the distinct wail of sirens grew louder, piercing the quiet of my neighborhood. Red and blue lights began to flash through the expansive windows of my villa, casting an eerie, shifting glow across the shocked faces of my friends. 2 officers emerged from the patrol car, a veteran sergeant with salt and pepper hair at his temples, and a younger officer carrying a tablet. They approached the door with professional neutrality, though I caught them casting quick, curious glances at the obviously peaceful, upscale suburban setting. "Good evening," the sergeant said when I opened the door, his tone calm and measured. "We received a complaint about excessive noise and possible domestic disturbance. I'm Sergeant Martinez. This is Officer Norman." Chloe pushed forward before I could even respond, seizing the narrative. "Yes, thank you for coming. They're having this loud party and completely harassing me." Sergeant Martinez's experienced eyes swept over the scene. My friends, all impeccably dressed, clutched their wine glasses, frozen mid-sip. The gentle hum of the jazz trio I'd hired now felt eerily loud in the sudden quiet. No rowdy college party, just a group of middle-aged Canadians trying to enjoy some good cheer. "Good evening, sir." Sergeant Martinez's voice was calm, professional. "We received a complaint about excessive noise and a possible domestic disturbance. Is this your residence?" I met his steady gaze. "Yes, officer, it is. We're having a private Christmas dinner, a gathering of friends and family." Officer Norman Younger, with a notebook, scribbled something down. "How many guests are you hosting tonight?" Martinez continued. 10 of us altogether." Officer Norman glanced at his watch. "It's almost 11, and frankly, I can barely hear a whisper from the street." He looked around, perhaps noticing the hushed atmosphere, the pensive decor. "The noise level seems quite contained now." Chloe, bless her dramatic heart, couldn't let it go. "It was much louder earlier," she shrieked, her voice still raw with manufactured outrage. "Completely inappropriate for a residential neighborhood." Sergeant Martinez turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, what is your relationship to the homeowner?" Chloe puffed out her chest. "He's my father, and he's been excluding me from family events. This is elder abuse." I heard the collective sharp intake of breath from my friends behind me, a silent gasp of disbelief and outrage. Martinez's gaze, now a little sharper, swung back to me. "Sir," he addressed me directly, "do you feel you are being abused or threatened in any way?" "No, officer." I stated, my voice steady, though my heart was still pounding from Chloe's theatrics. "I'm simply hosting a voluntary gathering of friends and family in my own home." Just then, Paul, my ever-dependable brother, stepped forward, his expression grim. "Officers, I'm Arthur's brother, Paul Collins. My niece," he gestured towards Chloe, "sent my brother a text message this morning stating she wanted a quiet Christmas with her in-laws instead of joining family." Officer Norman's eyebrows rose slightly. "You have this text message?" Paul didn't miss a beat. He pulled out his phone, already open, to the SMS thread I'd forwarded him earlier. Sergeant Martinez took the phone, his eyes scanning the screen. I could see the exact words glowing there. "We want to sit quietly for Christmas with the in-laws." He handed the phone back to Paul. "So, ma'am," he said, turning to Chloe, "you declined the invitation in writing." Chloe's voice cracked, full of frustration, and the dawning realization that her plan was unraveling. "That's not what I meant," she wailed. "He completely misunderstood." Officer Norman, ever the diplomat, simply stated, "The message seems pretty clear, ma'am." Liam, bless his poor, put-upon soul, finally piped up, his voice barely a whisper. "Maybe we should just go home, Chloe, and sort this out privately." "No," she shrieked, whirling on him, her eyes blazing. "They need to understand this is inappropriate." Just then, Tom Richardson, ever the calm, sensible voice, stepped forward from the living room. "Officers," he said, his voice deep and measured, "I apologize you were called out for this. We've been having a perfectly quiet evening. Most of us," he gestured around at the refined crowd, "are in our 60s and 70s, hardly a rowdy bunch." Sergeant Martinez's expression visibly relaxed, confirming my suspicion that he'd already made up his mind. "Sir," he addressed me again, "have any neighbors complained about noise?" "Not that I'm aware of, officer," I replied. Officer Norman, checking his tablet, confirmed. "We haven't received any other calls about this address tonight." Martinez then turned back to Chloe, his tone now carrying a subtle edge. "Ma'am, how did you know about this gathering?" Chloe's face flushed. "I saw photos on Facebook." The two officers exchanged a quick, knowing glance. It was clear what they were thinking. "This is what you called us out for." Martinez's voice hardened slightly. "Ma'am, you called in a noise complaint about an event you learned about through social media." Chloe's face turned an even deeper shade of red, a stark contrast to her platinum blonde hair. "It's the principal," she insisted, her voice tight with indignation. "This is harassment, sir." The sergeant addressed me, ignoring Chloe's sputtering. "You have every right to entertain guests on your own property, provided you're not violating any noise ordinances. From what we can observe, you're well within reasonable limits." Chloe, still desperate, cried out, "What about the elder abuse?" Sergeant Martinez's eyes, seasoned and assessing, met mine. "Sir, do you have any concerns about your safety or well-being? Are you being coerced or threatened in any way?" I met his gaze, my lips twisting into a faint, wry smile. "Only by the person who called you officer." A barely perceptible nod from the sergeant confirmed he understood the true dynamics at play. He turned back to Chloe, his voice now devoid of any patience. "Ma'am, filing false reports is a serious matter. We're going to need you to move your vehicle, which is currently blocking the driveway, and allow these people to conclude their evening peacefully." Chloe stood there utterly dumbfounded, her mouth agape. Her grand manipulation had backfired spectacularly, like a curling stone, veering wildly off course. "This isn't over." She spat at me, though the conviction in her voice was noticeably diminished, replaced by a defeated whine. The officers, efficient and weary, returned to their patrol car. I watched their red and blue lights recede into the crisp December night, disappearing down the cul-de-sac. Chloe stood rooted for a moment, then turned, her shoulders slumped, and stalked off. Liam scurrying after her like a lost puppy. She stood there right on my meticulously laid front walkway, looking like a Canada Goose jacket that had been dragged through a slough, utterly deflated, all the bluster gone. The police's quick exit had clearly knocked the wind right out of her sails. For the first time in ages, she looked, well, small, almost vulnerable. Liam hovered awkwardly at her side, probably wishing he could vanish into a snowdrift. "Chloe," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. "Care to step inside and hash this out, eh? Just us?" Her head snapped up, a flicker of something in her eyes that almost looked like hope. Maybe she truly believed this whole fiasco had somehow softened me. I gestured her towards my den, a quiet wood-paneled sanctuary off the main living area. Paul, bless his heart, was already herding the rest of the crew back into the great room, giving us the space we needed for this inevitable showdown. Liam stayed put in the foyer, hunched over, inspecting his shoes, like they held the cure for the common cold. The moment the heavy oak door clicked shut, muffling the festive hum of the party, Chloe launched right in. "Dad," she started, her voice a little less shrill now, "you gotta understand this." "Okay." I leaned back in my executive chair, fingers laced across my chest, and just waited. Let her talk. "I never meant for it to get like this." She offered a vague wave of her hand, encompassing the entire evening's spectacle. "The text. I didn't mean it the way you took it, eh?" My turn. "Then help me out, Chloe. What did you mean?" She started pacing in front of my impressive built-in bookshelves, gesturing wildly, as always. "I just meant we wanted a quiet Christmas morning with Liam's folks, you know, for coffee and stuff. I totally assumed we'd swing by for dinner later, or that you'd call. You never even mentioned dinner. Never asked about my plans. I thought it was just understood," she insisted, stopping her pacing for a moment. "We always figure something out, right?" I just kept my gaze steady on her, the silence stretching. "Chloe," I finally said, my voice quiet. "When was the last time you actually picked up the phone just to ask how I was doing? Not because you needed a favor or some cash, but just to chat, eh? Just to connect." She froze, the color draining from her face. "That's not fair, Dad," she snapped, resorting to her usual deflection. "It's a pretty simple question, kiddo." That silence hung heavy like a winter fog rolling in off the lake, thick with 30 years of unspoken expectations and ignored truths. "You're twisting this all around," she accused, her voice tight, "making it about something it's not." "Oh, then what is it about, Chloe? Lay it out for me." Her gaze darted around my office, landing on the framed awards, the high-end tech. "It's about this." She spat, a sudden venom in her tone. "This beautiful house I never knew existed. It's about all this money you never told me about. How long have you been hiding all of this from me, Dad?" There it was, the real concern bubbling to the surface like a nasty swamp gas. Not Christmas dinner, not tradition, not even missing her old man. No, it was about control, about access, about the terrifying prospect of her personal ATM suddenly going offline. "I haven't been hiding anything, Chloe," I stated calmly, pushing down the anger. "I've been successful, apparently a lot more successful than you ever bothered to notice, eh?" "But why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, a whine, creeping back in. "I'm your daughter. Do I owe you a financial report every month?" I retorted, a sarcastic edge to my voice. "Are my investments and life decisions subject to your approval, Chloe?" Her face flushed a deep crimson like a winter apple. "That's not what I mean," she insisted. "Then what do you mean?" I pressed, leaning forward slightly. "I mean," she stammered, "I need to know you'll still be there for me. That nothing's changed." Something in me just snapped. After the casual dismissal, the public tantrum, the police, the baseless accusations, she was still trying to pull the strings, still trying to keep her gravy train running. "What if things have changed, Chloe?" I asked, my voice flat. Her eyes wide and surprised mirrored the sudden chill in the room. "What do you mean?" She whispered, the question laced with genuine fear now. "What if—" I continued, pressing my advantage. "I'm just plain tired of being treated like a GIC with legs. What if I actually want a relationship with my own daughter that isn't based on what I can provide for you?" "You're being dramatic," she scoffed, trying to regain control. "I don't treat you like a bank account, Dad." I just slowly, deliberately pulled out my phone. A few taps, and I held it out to her, open to our text history. "Your last 10 messages to me, Chloe. Take a look." Her eyes scanned the screen, the stark reality laid bare. "Dad, can you spot us for the car payment?" "Dad, the roof's leaking like a sieve." "Dad, Liam's on the couch again." I let her absorb it. "When was the last time, Chloe, you sent a text just to ask how I was feeling, to share a laugh, to just say, 'Hi, Dad, thinking of you'?" She stared at the illuminated screen, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. "I love you, Chloe," I said, my voice softening just a fraction. "I always will," I affirmed, "but I'm just not going to keep enabling a relationship that only flows in one direction, like a one-way street in downtown Toronto, eh?" "You can't just cut me off," she blurted, a fresh wave of panic in her eyes. "I'm not cutting you off," I corrected, my voice firm. "I'm asking for something I haven't seen in a long mutual respect." Her expression hardened, shifting from panic to accusation. "This is because of Uncle Paul, isn't it? He's always been jealous of our bond." I stood up then, the sense of finality settling over me like the first heavy snowfall of the season. "No, Chloe," I said, meeting her gaze squarely. "This is because I finally figured out that I deserve a whole lot better than being taken for granted." The tears started then, slow at first, then a steady stream. But even as they tracked down her cheeks, they felt manufactured, like a perfectly timed power play on the ice, designed to elicit a specific reaction, not true emotion. "Please, Dad," she whimpered. "Don't do this. I need you." I paused just for a beat before delivering the truth, sharp and clear, like a Canadian winter morning. "You need my money, Chloe. There's a big difference." I turned then, making for the office door, ready to rejoin the people who actually valued me, not just my wallet. I valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Behind me, I heard her whisper, "This isn't over." But looking at my reflection in the office window, I realized with a clarity that settled like fresh-fallen snow that it truly was. I walked back toward the living room, my decision having crystallized like ice in my veins. Behind me, I heard Chloe's heels clicking frantically across the hardwood floor as she followed a predictable shadow. The moment we re-entered the main room, she launched her attack, a full-blown blizzard of accusations. "I need everyone to understand something," she announced loudly, positioning herself in the center of my guests, like she was about to present a keynote address. "My father has been hiding money from our family for years, money that should have been disclosed to me." The room fell into an unnerving silence. 10 pairs of eyes belonging to some of the most respected and successful people I knew shifted between us, watching this desperate performance with growing discomfort. "Chloe," I began, my voice steady. "No." She spun to face Tom Richardson, her eyes blazing. "Did you know he bought this house without telling his own daughter? $2.8 million. Where do you think that money came from, Tom?" Tom's eyebrows rose a slow, deliberate movement. "From his investments and hard work, I imagine," he replied, his voice calm. "Same place my money comes from." Chloe scoffed, ignoring him. "You don't understand. He's been manipulating financial records, hiding assets, I bet." "That's enough, Chloe." Paul stepped forward, his voice carrying a quiet warning like a low rumble of distant thunder. "You're making accusations you can't support." "I can support them," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He's been stealing from family accounts to fund this lifestyle." Patricia Webb actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "Chloe, your father showed us his portfolio 3 years ago when he was considering retiring. Every penny came from legitimate investments he made decades before you were even a twinkle in his eye." "She's right," Mark Henderson added, nodding gravely. "Arthur, didn't you get into Bitcoin when it was under $100? I nodded, a small wry smile on my face. "Purchased my first coins in 2011, Mark. And the tech startup investments," Linda Richardson prompted, picking up the thread. "Multiple companies starting in 2015. 3 went public. 2 were acquired." Chloe's face flushed a deep crimson as the mathematical reality hit the room. My wealth wasn't mysterious or stolen. It was well documented and witnessed by people who'd known me for decades, people who saw my grind, not just my gravy train. "But he never told me," she protested, her voice a defeated whine. "Why would he?" Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice cutting through the air like a skate blade on fresh ice. "You've never shown interest in his life, unless you needed something from him, Chloe." The brutal truth hung in the air, undeniable. Even Liam shifted uncomfortably, finally understanding how his wife appeared to others. "That's not true." Chloe's voice cracked a desperate denial. "I've always cared about my father." "When?" Paul challenged, his voice laced with the frustration of 30 years. "When was the last time you called to ask about his health, his happiness, his plans? Not for a handout, just to chat, eh?" Silence. "When was the last time you invited him to your house for dinner, just because?" Patricia added, her voice softer, but equally pointed. More silence. When was the last time you celebrated one of his achievements without immediately calculating what you could get from it? Tom's question landed like a physical blow, heavy and undeniable. Chloe looked around the room, seeing her isolation complete the entire circle of faces reflecting her exposed entitlement. Even her husband couldn't meet her eyes. "You don't understand our relationship," she whispered desperately, almost pleading. "We understand it perfectly," I said quietly, my voice firm as bedrock. "And that's the problem, Chloe." I took a breath, feeling the weight of 30 years of obligation and unspoken resentment finally lifting from my shoulders. "I want you both to leave my home and never return." The words dropped into absolute silence, heavy and final, like a stone in a deep well. Chloe stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in a foreign language. "You can't be serious, Dad." She finally managed her voice, barely a whisper. "I've never been more serious about anything in my life, Chloe." Her eyes widened with genuine shock, the facade finally cracking. "Dad, you can't mean that. I'm your daughter. You're a woman who has used me for 30 years without offering anything substantial in return." I countered, my voice steady. "Being my daughter doesn't entitle you to unlimited access to my resources or unlimited tolerance for disrespect." I walked toward the foyer, expecting them to follow, but they stood rooted to the spot, like two bewildered statues. When they didn't move, I turned back. I said, "Leave. This is insane." Chloe's voice rose to near hysteria again. "You're destroying our family over nothing. Over nothing." Paul's voice, thick with incredulous anger, cut in, leaving no room for argument. "You called the police on your own father for hosting a dinner party, Chloe Yo. You accused him of elder abuse in front of officers." Patricia added, her voice calm but unwavering. "You barged into his home uninvited and attacked him publicly." Tom's face, usually so composed, was etched with clear disgust. Each statement from my friends landed like a hammer blow, chipping away at Chloe's manufactured outrage. Chloe looked around the room desperately, her eyes darting from one familiar face to the next, searching for any glimmer of support. "Liam, tell them. Tell them this is wrong." Her husband, poor soul, looked at her for a long, agonizing moment, then his gaze shifted to me. His shoulders, previously slumped, seemed to deflate even further. "Chloe, we should go. You too." Her voice cracked a raw, wounded sound. "You're taking his side, too." Liam finally found some backbone, though his voice was tired, weighted with years of unspoken frustration. "I'm not taking sides, hon. I'm just recognizing reality." "He's right, Chloe. We both know he's right." I moved to the front door, the heavy oak swinging open easily to reveal the crisp December night air. It rushed in cold and clean, a welcome reprieve from the stifling tension. "I've spent 30 years enabling behavior that hurt both of us," I stated calmly, my voice steady and unwavering. "I won't spend what time I have left being treated like a GIC with legs and a pulse. I'll change." Chloe's voice was suddenly pleading, desperate. "I promise I'll be different. I'll show more appreciation. I'll call more often." "You had 30 years to change, Chloe," I countered, my gaze fixed on her. "Tonight proved you can't. This isn't about a misunderstanding. It's about a pattern." "But I'm your daughter," she cried, clutching at straws. "And I'm a human being who deserves basic respect, something you've never been able to provide." She looked around the room one final time, her eyes sweeping over the faces of my friends, seeing nothing but stone-cold expressions and disappointed shakes of heads. "You'll regret this," she spat, her voice hardening, laced with venom. "All of you will regret taking his side When you see what kind of man he really is, we already know what kind of man he is, Sarah said firmly, stepping forward slightly. We've known for decades. That's why we're here. Paul moved to stand beside me at the open door, his presence solid and comforting. Chloe, you need to leave now. She walked toward the exit, Liam trailing behind her, his shoulders slumped in utter embarrassment. At the threshold, she turned back one final time, her eyes locking onto mine. This isn't over, Dad. I won't let you cut me out of your life like this. Yes, I said quietly, my voice ringing with an undeniable finality. It is over, and you cut yourself out the moment you chose manipulation over love. I closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt with a decisive click. The sound of their cars starting and pulling away tires crunching on the gravel drive felt like the end of one life and the exhilarating beginning of another. Behind me, I heard the quiet murmur of my friends, my real family, resuming their celebration. For the first time in 30 years, my home was filled only with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I had finally learned the difference between being used and being loved, and it felt like pure, unadulterated freedom, like breaking through the ice after a long, cold winter. I stood in my foyer for a moment, my hands still on the deadbolt, processing the sheer magnitude of what had just happened. 30 years of enabling, 30 years of walking on eggshells, 30 years of being treated like a resource rather than a person. The weight I'd carried for so long lifted from my shoulders like morning fog, clearing from the Rockies. When I turned back toward the living room, I found my friends waiting, their face alight with expressions of pride and admiration I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Arthur, Patricia said quietly, her voice full of warmth. That took incredible courage. Tom Richardson stood and began to clap slowly, deliberately. One by one, the others joined him until the grand room filled with a genuine, heartfelt applause. Not for a performance, not for my house, but for a man who'd finally chosen to respect himself. You handled that with more grace than she deserved, Linda added, offering a soft, knowing smile. Paul stepped forward and embraced me, a bear hug that conveyed decades of unspoken support. His voice was thick with emotion as he murmured, "I've been waiting 30 years for you to do that, Art. I'm so proud of you." The validation hit me like a wave washing over me, strong and clean. These people, my real family, had witnessed everything and stood by me. They'd seen Chloe's true nature and my own quiet transformation, and they celebrated justice being served. Sarah raised her wine glass, her eyes twinkling. To Arthur Collins, a man who chose dignity over guilt and peace over chaos. To authentic relationships. Mark Henderson added, his voice ringing with conviction. To knowing your worth. Patricia chimed in, her glass clinking against mine. We drank, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades. The pure, unadulterated joy of being valued for who I was, not what I could. Paul, my brother and anchor, pulled me aside from the buzzing celebration. "Art, how's the old ticker doing now?" he asked, a knowing look in his eyes. "Paul," I breathed the word, a whisper. I feel like I've just broken through the ice on a spring lake. Free. Genuinely free for the first time in, well, forever, eh? He clapped me on the shoulder, a solid, reassuring weight. "You're not losing a daughter tonight, buddy." He said, his voice soft but firm. "You're just finally getting your own life back. She made her choice long ago. Tonight, you made yours." And he was absolutely right. The woman who just stormed out was a stranger, a ghost of the little girl I'd once taught to ride her first bike on the quiet cul-de-sac. That innocent spirit had been replaced by someone who only ever saw me as a bottomless bank account, a personal ATM on two legs. Linda Richardson, her eyes filled with a warmth that felt like a familiar wool blanket, joined us. Arthur, she began, her voice a little choked. I need to apologize for all the times over the years I saw how she treated you, how she took advantage, and I bit my tongue. We all did, eh? We knew you deserved so much more. Tom nodded, his expression solemn. We should have said something, Art. Stepped in sooner. But watching you tonight standing your ground like a true Canadian winter oak, that was truly something else to witness. As the last echoes of the dramatic exit faded, the conversation naturally pivoted like a shift in wind changing direction. No longer laced with apprehension about holidays poisoned by obligation. What would Christmas look like next year, New Year's Eve? My own birthday, which was usually just another day for paying bills. Sarah's eyes brightened. You simply have to host New Year's Eve here, Arthur. Think of it as a grand celebration of truly fresh starts. I felt a genuine, unfamiliar spark of excitement. I'd love that, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. All of us right here ringing in 2025 together. Patricia, ever the planner, chimed in. And your birthday in March. Art, a proper bash for a man who finally understands his own worth and deserves to be celebrated, eh? For the first time, in what felt like decades, I felt a genuine thrill about future gatherings. No more tiptoeing around landmines, no more walking on eggshells, wondering what veiled demand or manipulative mood swing awaited me. Just pure, unadulterated connections built on mutual respect and genuine affection. I can't believe I actually did it, I murmured, more to myself than to Paul. Believe it, buddy, he said, giving me a firm, affirming nod. You chose yourself tonight. You chose peace. And man, did you earn it. Around 2:30 a.m., as the crisp December night began to hint at the coming dawn, my wonderful guests started gathering their coats. The evening had been a roller coaster, to say the least. Thank you, I said to each and every person, my voice thick with emotion, as they prepared to leave. For bearing witness to that, for standing by me, for just being my real family. The goodbyes were different tonight. The hugs lingered a little longer, felt a little warmer, more substantial than mere social pleasantries. These weren't just acquaintances. These were bonds forged in fire, strengthened by a shared understanding of what was right and what was real. As the last car, Tom and Linda's BMW, finally pulled out of my meticulously landscaped driveway, I walked back into my magnificent villa. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was truly my sanctuary. The air inside felt cleaner, lighter, as if a heavy blanket of unspoken tension had been lifted from every room. The house, usually so grand, now felt expansive. Not physically larger, but spiritually unburdened, like it had exhaled years of suppressed resentment. I wandered through the hushed rooms, each one finally, completely, unequivocally mine. No guilt lurking in corners, no manipulative shadows, no invisible strings pulling me. I found myself in the gourmet kitchen, the very spot where this unexpected journey had begun just 18 hours earlier. I poured myself a mug of strong coffee, a Tim Hortons blend, of course, and stood at the vast windows overlooking my snow-dusted backyard. The landscape lights still twinkled little diamonds against the inky pre-dawn sky, but now they seemed to illuminate boundless possibility rather than just property lines. My phone, a silent sentinel, buzzed with a text from Patricia. Arthur, my friend. It read, "Thank you for showing us what real courage looks like. Sweet dreams, eh?" Then another from Tom. "Your home will always be a place of genuine warmth and respect. Sleep well, buddy." And finally, from Sarah, "Call us any time. You got a real family now." Each message landed like a soft, comforting snowfall, a tangible confirmation that I had unequivocally made the right choice. I let my gaze sweep over the gleaming quartz counters, the top-tier appliances, the very embodiment of the financial freedom I'd spent decades painstakingly building. My investments, this magnificent villa, the very resources I'd guarded and grown. For the first time, they felt truly, completely, unapologetically mine, to enjoy, to share, to do with, as I chose. No more gnawing guilt about not being fair to someone who had never once shown an ounce of fairness to me. The world, once a maze of obligations, suddenly stretched out before me like a vast, untracked wilderness. I could book that river cruise through Europe, finally wander through the sun-drenched vineyards of Tuscany, maybe even take a proper French cooking class in Paris. The sheer exhilarating openness of it all felt like a return to my youth, boundless and full of wonder. Or I could stay right here in this perfectly Canadian sanctuary and truly create the home I'd always envisioned, a place filled with easy laughter, instead of stifling tension, genuine appreciation, instead of relentless demands and true love, instead of exhausting obligation. Through the eastern windows, a faint blush began to paint the sky, the first shy hint of Christmas Eve dawn. Christmas Eve was beginning, and for the first time in 30 years, I felt a deep, authentic buzz of excitement for the holiday season. No more navigating family minefields, no more carefully curated gifts designed to ward off criticism, no more high-wire act, no more calculating the exact loonies and toonies it would take to buy a moment's peace. Just the pure, unvarnished pleasure of celebrating with folks who actually wanted to be in my orbit. My phone buzzed. "Paul. Right on cue, eh? How's the old ticker doing art?" He asked, his voice rough with concern, but I knew it was truly relief. "Better than I've felt in decades, pal." I answered, my voice thick with emotion. Honestly, I kept waiting for the familiar pang of guilt to hit that old Canadian heritage of duty before self. But it never came. It won't. Paul had said it plain as day. Guilt requires wrongdoing. "Arthur, and you did nothing wrong tonight. You just stood your ground like a proper winter oak." His words resonated deep. I told him, "I think I'll spend Christmas Day alone, Paul." A pause. "Not lonely, mind you," I clarified, a small smile touching my lips. "Just alone. There's a world of difference, eh?" "There absolutely is," he rumbled back. "And you've earned the right to peaceful solitude, art. Every single flake of it." After we hung up, I wandered onto my back terrace, the cool air biting, just a little invigorating my lungs. The sun was just cresting the eastern horizon, painting the snow-dusted ravines in hues of soft pink and gold. At 63, I was finally truly beginning my authentic life. The years ahead stretched before me like an untouched wilderness trail, boundless possibility instead of endless obligation, genuine respect instead of cynical exploitation, pure joy instead of the gnawing ache of guilt. I thought about pulling up that travel agent's number later today, maybe finally booking that trip to Ireland for St. Patrick's Day, or exploring the vastness of Australia's autumn. The sheer, exhilarating freedom to make plans on my terms without having to consult someone else's emotional weather report felt utterly revolutionary, like breaking free from years of frozen-in-time expectations. As the sunrise painted my custom-built villa in a warm, golden glow, I realized this wasn't just Christmas morning. This was the first day of my real life. I had chosen dignity over duty, peace over perpetual chaos, deep self-respect over a lifetime of family obligation. And it felt like coming home to myself after 63 years of being a stranger in my own story. The best gift I'd ever given myself, the one that truly mattered, was the raw courage to demand the respect I'd spent those 63 years earning. Christmas had finally, irrevocably come home.